Sean's asked me to talk about all the work the school's been doing on closing the gap in getting students to successfully respond to feedback in class. The rationale behind it is it's not a new thing, of course, so it's basically ensuring that the feedback that we give is effective and we're not wasting time giving it. And it's closing the gap between where a student should be in their learning and their attainment and where they actually are at the moment. In line with the school feedback cycle, this is what it looks like for Brookfield. So obviously the blue is making sure the students understand, and then we check that understanding through assessment and testing, and then give feedback. These strategies are meant to then ensure that the students act upon that feedback, and wherever possible we then reassess so that we can ensure they're making the best progress possible. Strategies that are working quite well across the school at the moment are a list up here. So I've gone through to a variety of departments and looked for what people have said have been the most useful. So burning questions is making sure that we're perhaps setting questions at the end of a piece of marking rather than just a generic comment that the students then have to respond to. Lots of people are making use of drafting and critique, so rewriting and sort of reworking pieces of work to improve upon them. Things like getting students to highlight key areas, so when you're actually marking, you can pay attention to the areas that the students are less sure about themselves to ensure that they're finished. With all of these, of course, it's just making sure that we have the time to spend on them and be adaptable with them, because they won't work for every teacher and they won't work for every class necessarily, so it's up to you to find the best methods possible. Examples from across the school at the moment, this is from Dave and P, who's been doing a lot of work on this, so looking at the method of critique, so rewriting pieces of work, getting students to work with each other on it, obviously you getting involved as well, adapting and editing bits that are working well and cutting out bits that aren't so good and redrafting it this way. Sarah in arts kindly let me use this, so looking at how in sort of visually you can get students to actually pick out what the improvements are and why one piece of work is better than another, and then perhaps getting students to do this not just once but maybe even 2 or 3 times to really see the improvements that can be made from redrafting. Last year Hannah did a learning and teaching briefing on marking keys, and this has saved lots of people lots of time, so it encourages students to think a little bit more deeply about it as well. In geography we use something like this, so it can save you time on having to rewrite really generic common feedback, and gets the students to actually have to sift through and look at what they need to improve upon, and they can then set their own targets. And then those targets, of course, you can always use to set as a target for a future piece of work when possible. Lots of departments are making use of burning questions that I mentioned earlier, so asking a very specific question that the student has to respond to. That's one from PE. Owen's lent me this one from history, and this is from a student who's getting sort of 18 out of 19 on pieces of work, so you can still use it with your higher ability students as well. As he's done here, when possible, try to get back in and reflect on what their improvement has been. Maths have got a whole department policy at the moment on sort of ask an expert, so it doesn't just have to be literacy based subjects. So here students actually go out and speak to another student who is shown themselves to be working quite well, and the student can actually speak to those students, go back and work out the answers themselves to show improvement too. Obviously you can use your professional judgment on what works well for your sets. With a couple of my GCSE groups, I did quite a simple questionnaire of just all the strategies that I trialled over a few months, and always, often, sometimes, or never helpful, and then just a circle 1 to 3 as to whether they're used too often, about right, or not enough. And from that, you can actually gauge from your classes which strategies they find most useful and whether you're using those as frequently as they might be useful. Challenges that everyone's still working on at the moment is the idea of top one about it's not always successful straight away. So sometimes it can take classes a while to get to the hang of it. The frequency with which you use them, so it might not always be suitable to use a full critique and reassess every time you mark a piece of work, but that's something which we can work on and try to improve as best we can. Monitoring, so making sure you're trying to do this with all your classes. Obviously it's much easier to tend to do reflection lessons with higher ability students who are more keen and more able than lower ability students, but trying to readdress that balance. And lots of subjects are very curriculum content heavy, so making sure that you're not wasting all your time on reflection when you need to be getting in the content as well, so obviously trying to get that balance between the two. In terms of moving forward, some staff have got this for their Blue Sky focus for this year, so please feel free to use any or all of these strategies and any of your own. And please do monitor and feedback to your learning and teaching group members in your department, who can then liaise back with Sean and myself, and we can look at collating all these ideas together and ways where everyone can use it and it's really effective. Thanks very much.